Clara Whitmore's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she signed the paper that sold her future for $50. She was 19 years old, still untouched, and her own aunt had just traded her away like an unwanted horse to a man she'd never met, a widower with 3 motherless children living somewhere in the frozen wilderness of Montana Territory. What happened next in that snow-buried ranch would shatter everything Clara thought she knew about love, family, and her own worth. Stay with me until the very end, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Clara's journey has traveled across the world. Now let's begin. The winter of 1883 came early to Dodge City, Kansas, and it came without mercy. Clara stood in her aunt's kitchen, her fingers raw from scrubbing the same pot she'd scrubbed 1,000 times before, when Ruth walked in with a stranger and changed everything. "This is Mr. Harlan," Ruth said, not bothering with pleasantries. "He's here about you." Clara didn't look up from the pot. She'd learned years ago that looking up only invited trouble. "She's healthy," Ruth continued, addressing the man as if Clara were livestock at auction. 19 years old, knows her way around a house, can cook, clean, sew. Never been touched by a man, if that matters to whoever's asking. Clara's hands froze in the water. The cold seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through her chest. "It matters," the stranger said. His voice was flat, businesslike. "The gentleman in question is particular about that." "Well, she's pure as snow. I'd swear it on my sister's grave if I had to." Clara finally looked up. The man called Harlan was middle-aged, dressed in clothes too fine for Dodge City, with eyes that cataloged her the way a butcher cataloged cuts of meat. "Stand up, girl," Ruth ordered. "Let him see you proper." Clara rose slowly, her wet hands dripping onto the floor. She didn't speak. She'd learned that too. Speaking only gave people something to criticize. Harlan circled her once, nodded to himself. "She'll do. $50 as agreed, plus train fare to Helena." "55, Ruth countered. "Winter's coming. You're getting her at a good time. Whoever this rancher is, he'll have help through the worst months." 52. "That's my final offer." "Done." Clara watched them shake hands over her future. $52. That's what she was worth. Less than a good horse. About the same as a decent milk cow. "What?" Her voice cracked. She hadn't used it much lately. "What's happening?" Ruth turned to her with an expression Clara had never seen before. Something that might have been guilt quickly smothered. "You're going to Montana Territory. There's a rancher there who needs a wife. Well, not a wife exactly. Someone to keep his house and raise his children. His real wife died last year. You're selling me. I'm giving you an opportunity." Ruth's voice hardened. "You think I can keep feeding you forever? Henry doesn't want you in the house once we're married. This is the best I can do." "The best you can do is sell me to a stranger." Ruth's hand moved fast. Clara saw it coming, but didn't dodge. The slap rang through the kitchen, leaving her cheek burning. "Don't you dare!" Ruth's voice shook with something Clara couldn't identify. "Don't you dare make me the villain here. I've fed you for 7 years, clothed you, kept a roof over your ungrateful head. Your mother would have done the same in my position." "My mother would never—" "Your mother is dead." Ruth spat the words like venom. "And I've done my duty by her. Now it's time you earned your keep somewhere else." Clara stood there, her cheek throbbing, her heart somewhere on the floor. 7 years. 7 years of scrubbing and cooking and mending, and never being quite good enough. 7 years of being told she was lucky to have a roof over her head. 7 years of being reminded daily that she was a burden. And now this. "When do I leave?" she heard herself ask. "Tomorrow morning. Train to Helena, then someone will meet you there." Harlan pulled an envelope from his coat. "These are your papers. Don't lose them. The man who's taking you, his name is Caleb Hartley. He's got a ranch about 2 days' ride from Helena. 3 children. His wife died of pneumonia 14 months ago." Clara took the envelope with numb fingers. "Does he know what he's getting?" Harlan actually laughed. He knows he's getting a warm body to keep his house running. That's all he asked for. What you make of it after that is your own business. The train left Dodge City at 7 in the morning, cutting through a landscape that grew colder and more desolate with every mile. Clara sat by the window with her single canvas bag at her feet, everything she owned in the world. 2 dresses, one for work, and one for what passed as Sunday best. A shawl her mother had knitted before the sickness took her. A photograph faded and cracked of her parents on their wedding day. A hairbrush missing half its bristles. A Bible she couldn't remember the last time she'd opened. $52 worth of possessions for a $52 girl. The other passengers gave her space, whether from kindness or indifference, she couldn't tell. A woman traveling alone was either trouble or in trouble, either way, best avoided. Clara watched Kansas disappear behind her and tried to feel something. Fear, anger, hope, anything. But there was only emptiness. The same emptiness that had lived inside her since she was 12 years old and realized no one was coming to save her from Aunt Ruth's house. The same emptiness that had taught her to stop wanting things, stop expecting things, stop believing in things. At least in Montana, she wouldn't have to pretend anymore. She wasn't family there. She wasn't even a person, really just a transaction. $52 and train fare. At least that was honest. Helena was bigger than she'd expected, louder and dirtier and more alive. Clara stepped off the train into a chaos of noise and movement, clutching her bag like it might sprout wings and fly away. "Miss Whitmore?" She turned. A man stood a few feet away, older than Harlan, with kind eyes and a weathered face. "I'm Miss Whitmore. Name's Samuel. I work for Mr. Hartley. He sent me to collect you." Samuel's eyes swept over her, not appraising like Harlan's, just curious. "You're younger than I expected." "Is that a problem?" "No, ma'am. Just an observation." He reached for her bag. "We've got a long ride ahead. Best get started before the weather turns." "Turns to what?" Samuel looked at the sky, then back at her, and something like pity crossed his face. "Winter, ma'am. Montana winter ain't like what you're used to. Hope they told you what you're getting into." They hadn't. No one had told her anything. The ride to the Hartley Ranch took 2 days, just as Harlan had said. 2 days of frozen roads of wind that cut through every layer of clothing Clara owned, of stopping at remote outposts where the men looked at her with curiosity and the women with something like sympathy. Samuel didn't talk much, which Clara appreciated. He pointed out landmarks, occasionally warned her about the terrain, offered her extra blankets when the temperature dropped. "Mr. Hartley?" she asked on the second day when she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "What's he like?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "He's a good man." That's not really an answer. "No, ma'am, it ain't." Samuel adjusted the reins, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he should spit out. "He was a good man, I should say, before Eleanor died. Now he's something else. Not bad, just broken. Grief does that to people." "And the children? 3 of them. Thomas is 8, thinks he's grown. Mary's 6, quiet as a mouse. Sarah's 3, don't remember her mama much." Samuel paused. "They need someone, Miss Whitmore. Someone gentle. Someone patient. Their daddy loves them. But love ain't always enough when you're drowning in your own sorrow." Clara thought about that for a long time. Thought about children who'd lost their mother, a man who'd lost his wife, a house that had lost its heart. Maybe there was something she could do there. Maybe she could be useful in a way she'd never been useful before. Or maybe she'd fail, and they'd send her back, and then where would she go? There was no back. That was the truth she'd been avoiding since Dodge City. There was no Aunt Ruth waiting to take her in. No family anywhere who wanted her. No friends. No money. No options. Montana was it. Caleb Hartley was it. This frozen wilderness where the wind screamed like something dying was the only future she had. She'd better make it work. The storm hit on the second night, turning the world into a howling white void. Samuel pushed the horses hard, his face grim beneath his hat. "Ranch is close," he shouted over the wind. "Half-mile, maybe less. Just hold on." Clara held on. Her fingers had stopped feeling anything hours ago. Her face was numb. Her feet were numb. Everything was numb. She wondered distantly if this was what dying felt like, the slow surrender of sensation until there was nothing left but cold. Then, lights appeared through the snow. Faint at first, just smudges of yellow in the white, then clearer. A house. A barn. Shapes that meant shelter, warmth, survival. Samuel pulled the wagon up to the main house and jumped down. "Stay here. I'll get him." Clara couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. The cold had locked her joints, frozen her muscles, turned her into a statue of ice and exhaustion. The door of the house opened. Light spilled out, and with it came a figure, tall, broad, dark, against the golden glow. Caleb Hartley. Clara's first thought was that he looked carved from stone. Not handsome exactly, but striking in the way that mountains were striking. Hard edges, weathered surfaces, an impression of weight that went deeper than bone. Her second thought was that he looked angry. "This her—" His voice carried over the storm, rough and low. "Yes, sir, Miss Clara Whitmore." Caleb approached the wagon, and Clara got her first real look at him. Dark hair going gray at the temples, a jaw that looked like it hadn't unclenched in months, eyes the color of a winter sky, gray, cold, and utterly unreadable. He studied her for a moment, his gaze traveling from her face to her hands to her inadequate clothing, and something flickered in those frozen eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. "She's half dead," he said flatly. "Samuel, help her down. Get her inside before she freezes." "I can walk?" Clara said, the words coming out ragged through chattering teeth. Caleb's eyes snapped to hers. For a moment, something like surprise crossed his face. Surprise that she'd spoken, or surprise at what she'd said. "Can you?" he asked. Clara forced her frozen limbs to move. She climbed down from the wagon on legs that shook violently, gripping the side for support. The ground felt like it was swaying beneath her, but she stayed upright through sheer stubbornness. Caleb watched her struggle. He didn't offer to help. "All right," he said when she stood on her own feet. "You can walk. Now get inside before you can't." He turned and walked toward the house without waiting to see if she followed. Clara followed. What else could she do? Dow. The warmth inside hit her like a wall so intense after the cold that it hurt. She stood just inside the door, dripping melted snow onto the wooden floor, and tried to take in her surroundings. A large room serving as kitchen and living space, a fire roaring in a stone fireplace. Rough furniture, well worn but solid. Everything clean but impersonal, like a house that had forgotten it was supposed to be a home. And there by the fire, 3 small figures staring at her with varying degrees of suspicion. Children. Caleb's voice was firm but gentler than it had been outside. "This is Miss Whitmore. She's going to be staying with us. Miss Whitmore, these are my children. Thomas, Mary, and Sarah." Clara looked at them, really looked, and felt her heart crack. Thomas stood slightly in front of his sisters, protective despite being only 8 years old. His face was closed off, hostile, his eyes too old for his young face. Mary clutched her brother's sleeve, half hidden behind him. 6 years old, with tangled blonde hair and a dress that had been mended so many times, Clara could barely see the original fabric. Sarah, the youngest, peered around Mary with curious eyes. She was the only one who didn't look afraid. "Hello?" Clara said softly, dropping to her knees so she was at their level. Her frozen joints screamed in protest, but she ignored them. "It's nice to meet you." Thomas said nothing. Mary pressed closer to her brother. Sarah took a step forward. "Are you dead?" Sarah asked. Clara blinked. "What?" "Your face is all white, like Mama's face when she went to sleep forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara heard Caleb's sharp intake of breath, saw Thomas's face go pale, watched Mary's eyes fill with tears. "I'm not dead, sweetheart," Clara said gently. "I'm just very cold. The snow made my face white, but I promise I'm alive." "Oh," Sarah considered this. "That's good. I don't want you to go to sleep forever, too. I'll do my best not to." Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied, and retreated to her siblings. But she kept watching Clara with those bright, curious eyes, the only one in the room who seemed willing to give her a chance. "Thomas." Caleb's voice cut through the tension. "Show Miss Whitmore to her room, the one at the end of the hall." Thomas's jaw tightened. I know what it is. Show her anyway." For a moment, something passed between father and son, some silent battle of wills that Clara couldn't read. Then Thomas nodded stiffly. "Follow me," he said to Clara, his voice flat. She followed him down a short hallway to a door at the end. Thomas pushed it open without going inside. "This was our mother's sewing room," he said, "before." Clara looked into the room. Small, sparse clean. A bed with a thin mattress. A chest for belongings. A tiny table with a basin and pitcher. "Thank you," she said. Thomas turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at her with eyes that burned with something Clara recognized intimately. Grief turned to anger, because anger was easier. "She shouldn't have sent you here," he said. "My mother. No one can replace her. No one should even try." "I'm not trying to replace anyone," Clara said quietly. "Then why are you here?" It was a fair question. Clara thought about lying, about softening the truth, about protecting this fierce little boy from the ugliness of adult transactions. But she'd spent 7 years surrounded by pretty lies. She was tired of them. "Because I had nowhere else to go," she said simply. "Your father needed help. I needed a home. That's all this is." Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he walked away. Clara stepped into the room that used to belong to a dead woman and closed the door behind her. She didn't sleep that night. The bed was too cold, the house too full of unfamiliar sounds, her mind too loud with everything that had happened. At some point, she couldn't tell what hour she heard a noise outside her door. Soft footsteps, hesitant and light. Clara lay still, listening. The footsteps paused outside her room. A long moment of silence. Then, so quiet, she almost missed it, a small voice. "Mama." Clara's heart stopped. "Mama, is that you?" It was Sarah, the littlest one, standing outside the door of a room that used to belong to her mother, asking if the dead had come back. Clara didn't know what to do. What was right, what was kind, what wouldn't make everything worse. She lay there in the darkness, frozen by indecision, and listened to a 3-year-old girl calling for a mother who would never answer. Finally, the footsteps retreated. Clara heard a door open and close somewhere in the house, Sarah returning to her own room, her question unanswered. Clara turned her face into the pillow and did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. Not for herself, not for Aunt Ruth's betrayal, or her uncertain future, or the $52 that had bought her. She cried for 3 children who'd lost their mother, for a man who'd lost his wife, for a house that had forgotten how to be a home, and somewhere in the crying, somewhere in the darkness and cold and grief, Clara made a decision. She couldn't replace Eleanor Hartley. Thomas was right about that. But maybe, just maybe, she could help this family learn how to live again. It wasn't much. It wasn't love or acceptance or belonging. It was just usefulness, just purpose, just a reason to get up in the morning. But for a girl who'd been told her whole life that she wasn't wanted, it was enough. It had to be enough. Morning came gray and bitter, the storm still howling outside like something that wanted in. Clara was already awake when she heard movement in the main room. She'd been awake for hours watching the darkness slowly give way to something that wasn't quite light. She dressed quickly in her work dress, the one with patches on patches. The one that said she was here to work, not to impress, and braided her hair with fingers that were still clumsy from yesterday's cold. When she opened her door, she found Mary standing in the hallway. The little girl froze, caught in the act of sneaking past Clara's room. Her eyes went wide like a rabbit spotting a wolf. "Good morning," Clara said softly. Mary said nothing. She just stared. "I'm not going to hurt you," Clara tried. "I know you don't know me yet, but are you going to stay?" The question came out in a rush, almost accusatory. "I'd like to," Clara said carefully. "If you'll have me." The last lady didn't stay. Clara blinked. "What last lady?" "Mrs. Brennan. She came after Mama died. She said we were too wild, and she left in the middle of the night, and Papa was so angry, and Thomas cried even though he said he didn't." Mary's voice was matter-of-fact, reciting trauma like it was a grocery list. "Are you going to leave in the middle of the night too?" Clara knelt down, ignoring the protest of her knees against the hard floor. "Mary, look at me." The little girl's eyes met hers, reluctant and afraid. "I don't know what's going to happen," Clara said honestly. "I can't promise you I'll be here forever. Nobody can promise that your mama probably thought she'd be here forever and—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "But I can promise you this, I won't leave without saying goodbye. I won't disappear in the middle of the night. If I go, you'll know why. Is that fair?" Mary considered this with the gravity of someone much older. Then she nodded once. "That's fair," she said. "Papa's in the barn. Thomas is with him. Sarah's still sleeping. Breakfast is supposed to be porridge, but I don't know how to make it without burning it. Would you like me to help?" Mary hesitated. Then slowly she nodded again. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something. Clara followed Mary into the kitchen and began her first day as the woman Caleb Hartley had bought for $52. She found the note 2 hours later. It was tucked behind a canister of flour yellowed with age, written in a feminine hand that was careful and clear. "The stove runs hot on the left side. Adjust the porridge pot accordingly." Clara stared at the note for a long moment, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Eleanor Hartley. These were Eleanor's words. Eleanor's wisdom left behind like breadcrumbs for whoever came after. She folded the note carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Then she adjusted the porridge pot to the right side of the stove and kept cooking. When Caleb came in for breakfast, he stopped just inside the door. The table was set. The porridge was hot and unburned. Coffee steamed in cups. The children sat in their places waiting. Clara stood by the stove, uncertain what to do with herself now that the work was done. "You found the note," Caleb said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Clara said. "About the stove." Something crossed his face, pain maybe, or memory. "She left dozens of them, all over the house. I keep finding them." He paused. "I should have warned you." "No." Clara shook her head. "They're helpful. I'm grateful for them." Caleb looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once and sat down at the table. "Let's eat," he said. "We've got work to do." It wasn't a welcome. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't anything close to warmth. But Clara sat down at the table with the Hartley family and ate breakfast, and for the first time since Dodge City, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days folded into each other, one bleeding into the next, until Clara lost track of how long she'd been at the Hartley Ranch. A week, maybe 2. Time moved differently out here, measured not in hours, but in tasks completed, meals, cooked, fires kept burning against the relentless cold. She learned the rhythms of the house, slowly, carefully, like someone learning to walk again after a long illness. The stove that ran hot on the left side. The pump that stuck unless you lifted the handle just so. The floorboard outside Thomas's room that creaked loud enough to wake the dead. And the notes. Always the notes. She found them everywhere. Tucked into cupboards, folded between linens, pressed inside books she pulled from dusty shelves. Eleanor's voice preserved in ink and paper, teaching Clara how to care for a family that wasn't hers. Sarah won't eat carrots unless they're cut small. Thomas pretends he doesn't need help with his reading, but he does. Mary has nightmares about fire. Don't let the candle burn too close to her door. Clara memorized each one. She didn't just read them. She studied them like scripture, like they contained the secrets to a kingdom she desperately wanted to enter. The children watched her. That was the hardest part, those constant measuring eyes waiting for her to fail. Thomas watched with open hostility, looking for proof that she didn't belong. Mary watched with cautious hope, wanting to trust, but too scared to try. Sarah watched with the simple curiosity of the very young, not yet old enough to understand why everyone was so sad all the time. And Caleb. Caleb barely looked at her at all. He was gone before dawn most mornings, out in the barn, or riding the fence lines, doing whatever needed doing to keep a ranch alive through Montana winter. He came in for meals, ate quickly, spoke only when necessary. At night he retreated to his room with a bottle and his ghosts, and Clara learned not to expect anything more. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't here to be loved. She was here to be useful. But sometimes late at night, when the wind howled and the house creaked and she lay alone in Eleanor's sewing room, she wondered if useful would ever be enough. The first real test came on a Tuesday. Clara was kneading bread when she heard the crash from the children's room, followed immediately by Thomas's voice, sharp with fear. "Mary, Mary, wake up!" Clara was moving before she knew she'd decided to move, flour still coating her hands, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pushed open the door to find Thomas kneeling beside Mary's bed, his face white. Mary was convulsing. Her small body jerked and twisted, her eyes rolled back, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. "What happened?" Clara dropped to her knees beside them. "I don't know. She was fine, and then she just... Get your father, now!" Thomas ran. Clara could hear his boots pounding through the house, the crash of the front door, his voice screaming across the yard. Mary's convulsions slowed, then stopped. The little girl went limp, her breathing shallow and ragged. "Mary." Clara touched her forehead. Burning hot. "Mary, can you hear me?" No response, just that terrible, shallow breathing. Caleb burst through the door, Thomas at his heels. He took one look at his daughter and went pale. "How long?" "A minute, maybe two. She's burning up." Caleb gathered Mary into his arms, and Clara saw his hands shake. Saw the way his jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding. Saw the ghost of another sickbed, another woman he couldn't save. "Eleanor died like this." His voice was barely a whisper. "She started with a fever. And then, Mary is not Eleanor." Clara stood, forcing authority into her voice she didn't feel. "She's young and strong, and we caught it early. I need cold water, clean cloths, and whatever medicine you have. Now, Caleb, right now." He stared at her. For a moment she thought he might shatter right there in front of her, break apart into pieces too small to ever reassemble. Then something hardened in his eyes. He nodded once. "Thomas, get water from the well, cold as you can. Sarah." He looked around, seemed to remember his youngest. "Where's Sarah?" "I'll get her," Clara said. "You stay with Mary." She found Sarah in the kitchen, standing exactly where Clara had left her, her small face frozen with terror. "Is Mary dead?" Clara knelt down, took Sarah's cold hands in her flour-covered ones. "No, sweetheart. Mary is sick, but we're going to help her. I need you to be very brave. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, her lower lip trembling. "Good girl. I need you to stay in the kitchen and keep the fire going. Can you do that, just like I showed you, small pieces of wood, not too many at once?" "I can do that." "I know you can." Clara kissed her forehead. "You're the bravest girl I know." She left Sarah feeding the fire with careful hands and went back to Mary's room. What followed were the longest hours of Clara's life. She worked alongside Caleb, cooling Mary's fever with wet cloths, dripping willow bark tea into her mouth drop by drop, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Thomas sat in the corner, his face blank with shock. Clara sent him to check on Sarah every hour, giving him something to do, some way to feel useful. Each time he came back, his eyes went straight to Mary. Is she going to die? Clara didn't lie to him. I don't know, but we're doing everything we can. Night fell. The fever raged on. Caleb hadn't moved from Mary's bedside. He held her hand like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. You should rest, Clara said softly. No. Caleb, I said no. His voice cracked. I wasn't here when Eleanor... I was in the barn, checking on a sick calf. A goddamn calf. And when I came back, she was... He stopped, his throat working. I won't leave her. I won't. Clara understood. She didn't argue. Instead, she pulled a chair close to his and sat down. Not touching him, but close enough that he could feel her presence. Tell me about Eleanor, she said quietly. Caleb's head snapped toward her. What? Tell me about her. What was she like? For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly the words started to come. She laughed. God, she laughed at everything. Even when things were hard, even when we had nothing, she'd find something to laugh about. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used for this purpose in a long time. She made this place feel like home. I just built the walls, but she made it alive. She loved you. She loved everything. The children, the land, even the damn chickens. She had so much love in her that it spilled out onto everyone around her. He paused. When she died, all that love just stopped, like someone blew out a candle, and I've been stumbling around in the dark ever since. Clara didn't know what to say to that, didn't know if there was anything to say, so she just sat there in the dark and kept vigil beside him. Near midnight, Mary's fever broke. Clara noticed at first the slight change in the child's breathing, the way her skin felt cooler under the cloth. She checked again, not daring to hope, not daring to believe. Caleb. He jerked awake. He'd dozed off despite his determination. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. Feel her forehead. Caleb pressed his palm to Mary's skin, held it there. His face crumpled. Oh, thank God! The words came out broken, shattered. Thank God! Thank God! Mary's eyes fluttered open. Papa? Caleb made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. He pulled his daughter into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. I'm here, baby girl. Papa's right here. Mary's eyes found Clara over her father's shoulder. Miss Clara stayed too. I did. Clara wiped her eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Later, much later, after Mary had drunk some broth and fallen into a natural healing sleep, after Thomas had finally allowed himself to be sent to bed, after Sarah had been carried sleeping from her post by the fire, Caleb found Clara in the kitchen. She was cleaning up the mess from the bread she'd never finished making, her movements mechanical, her body running on nothing but willpower. You should sleep, Caleb said. So should you. He almost smiled. Almost. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man. They stood there in the silence, the weight of the night pressing down on both of them. Thank you. Caleb's voice was barely audible. What you did, how you took charge. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. I was just... You were terrified. Any parent would be. Eleanor was the strong one. When the children were sick, she always knew what to do. I stood there like a fool and let her handle everything. He shook his head. And now she's gone and I still don't know what to do. I'm still that same fool standing there while someone else saves my children. Clara set down the cloth she'd been using to wipe the counter. She turned to face him fully. You're not a fool. You're a man who loved his wife and lost her, and that kind of loss. It doesn't heal quickly. It doesn't heal easily. Sometimes it doesn't heal at all. She paused, gathering courage. But you're here. You're still here, still fighting, still trying to hold this family together. That's not foolishness. That's strength. Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since she'd arrived. His gray eyes searched her face like he was seeing something new, something he hadn't noticed before. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why do you care? You don't know us. We're strangers who bought you like property. Why do you care what happens to my children?" Clara thought about lying, about giving him a pretty answer, something safe and expected. Instead, she told him the truth. "Because no one ever cared what happened to me. And I know what that feels like to be alone, to be scared, to wonder if anyone in the world would notice if you just disappeared." Her voice caught. "Your children aren't going to feel that way. Not if I can help it." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched her shoulder just briefly, barely there before pulling back like he'd burned himself. "Get some sleep, Clara. You've earned it." He walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the house. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, her shoulder still warm where his hand had been, and wondered what had just changed between them. The next morning, Mary was sitting up in bed demanding breakfast. Clara made porridge with honey, a luxury she'd found in the cellar, and brought it to her on a tray. Mary ate every bite. "Miss Clara?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you going to stay now because you saved me?" Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "I was always going to stay, Mary. Saving you didn't change that." Mary considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. "But now Papa knows you're good. Before he wasn't sure. I could tell. He looked at you like you might break something." Out of the mouths of babes, Clara thought. And how does he look at me now? Mary tilted her head, thinking. Different. Like maybe you won't break something after all. Like maybe you might fix something instead. Thomas appeared in the doorway. He'd been avoiding Clara since Mary woke up his emotions too big for his 8-year-old body to contain. "Thomas." Clara kept her voice gentle. "Would you like to sit with your sister?" He hesitated. Something was warring in his face, the hostility he'd worn since she arrived, fighting against something newer, something softer. "She's really okay. She's really okay. The fever broke and she's going to be fine." Thomas's shoulders dropped. For a moment, just a moment, he looked like the child he actually was, instead of the little adult he'd been forced to become. "I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought she was going to die like Mama. I thought I was going to lose her too." Clara stood and crossed the room. She didn't try to hug him. She knew instinctively he wasn't ready for that, but she put her hand on his shoulder. I know how scared you were. But Mary is strong just like you. Just like your whole family." Thomas looked at her hand on his shoulder, then at her face. Something shifted in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what? For being mean to you. For acting like you didn't belong here." He swallowed hard. "You saved my sister. You didn't have to. You could have just let Papa handle it and not gotten involved. But you didn't. You stayed." "Of course I stayed." "Mrs. Brennan wouldn't have stayed." Thomas's jaw tightened at the memory. "She would have let Papa handle everything and complained about the noise. She only lasted 2 weeks before she ran away." Clara knelt down so she was eye level with him. "I'm not Mrs. Brennan, and I'm not going to run away. I know you don't trust me yet, and that's okay. Trust takes time. But I'm going to keep showing up every day until you believe me." Thomas studied her face like he was searching for a lie. He didn't find one. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, Miss Clara." It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something. The days after Mary's illness were different, not easier. Nothing about life on a Montana ranch in winter was easy, but different. The air in the house felt lighter somehow, like a pressure had been released. Thomas stopped glaring at Clara and started watching her with something closer to curiosity. He even helped her carry wood for the stove one morning, mumbling something about how she was doing it wrong, and he'd better show her the right way. Mary followed Clara around like a shadow, chattering about everything and nothing, asking 1,000 questions about where Clara came from, and why she talked different, and did she know how to braid hair, because Mama used to braid her hair. But Papa's fingers were too big, and Thomas didn't know how. "I can braid hair," Clara said, and Mary's face lit up like sunrise. Sarah had appointed herself Clara's official helper, standing on a stool beside her in the kitchen, helping. With tasks that mostly involved making messes, Clara would have to clean up later. Clara didn't mind. She'd never been trusted with anything before, not even a 3-year-old's assistance. And Caleb was changing too. He still worked from before dawn to after dusk, still came in covered in mud, and exhaustion, still retreated to his room, with his ghosts and his grief. But now he looked at Clara when she spoke. Now he thanked her for meals. Now occasionally he almost smiled. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first real conversation happened a week after Mary's fever broke. Clara was mending by the fire, working through the mountain of torn clothes that never seemed to shrink when Caleb sat down across from her. "You're good at that," he said. Clara looked up surprised. He rarely initiated conversation. "My mother taught me, before she died." "Right. How old were you by 12? Clara's needle kept moving, the familiar rhythm steadying her. "She and my father both died of diphtheria, within 2 weeks of each other. And then I went to live with my Aunt Ruth. She needed someone to cook and clean. I needed somewhere to go." Clara shrugged, trying to make it sound smaller than it was. "It worked out for a while. But not forever. No, not forever. She got engaged to a man who didn't want someone else's burden cluttering up his new house, so she found somewhere else to send me." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "She sent you to me. $52 and train fare. That was the arrangement." "I'm sorry." Clara looked up startled. "What?" "I'm sorry. For how you came here. For what it must have felt like to be traded. Like you didn't matter." He met her eyes, and there was something raw in his gaze. "You matter, Clara. I should have told you that sooner." Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time someone had told her she mattered. Maybe no one ever had. "Why did you agree to it?" she asked. "To have someone sent to you like a package?" Caleb leaned back, his eyes going distant. "Because I was drowning. After Eleanor died, I couldn't function. The children needed things I didn't know how to give them. The house was falling apart. I was falling apart. And I thought maybe if I'd just had someone to handle the practical things, the cooking and cleaning and such, then maybe I could hold on long enough to figure out how to live again." "And has it worked?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered in his gray eyes. "It's working better than I expected," he said quietly. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone who would do the work and stay out of the way. Someone who would treat this like a job and nothing more." He paused. "Not someone who would stay up all night to save my daughter. Not someone who would kneel in the dirt to comfort my son. Not someone who would let my youngest follow her around like a baby duck." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "No, you're doing more than that." Caleb stood abruptly, like he'd said too much and needed to escape before he said more. "Thank you. For everything." He was at the door before Clara found her voice. "Caleb." He paused, but didn't turn around. "I'm glad I came here. Whatever the circumstances. I'm glad." He stood there for a moment, his back rigid, his hand on the doorframe. Then he nodded once and disappeared into the darkness. Clara went back to her mending, but her mind was elsewhere. Something was changing. Something was growing. Something was taking root in the frozen ground of this broken household, pushing up through the snow toward light. She didn't know what it was yet. Didn't know what it would become. But, for the first time in her life, Clara Whitmore dared to hope it might be something good. 2 days later, the letter arrived. Samuel brought it from town, along with supplies, handing it to Caleb with a worried look that made Clara's stomach tighten. Caleb read it in silence. His face went hard. "What is it?" Clara asked. He didn't answer, just folded the letter carefully, put it in his pocket, and walked outside without a word. Clara exchanged a look with Samuel. The old ranch hand shook his head. "Trouble," he said quietly. "That letter's from Elijah Crane. He owns the big spread to the north. Been wanting this land for years." "What does he want?" Samuel's face was grim. "Whatever it is, it ain't good. Crane doesn't write letters to be friendly. He writes letters to threaten." Clara looked out the window at Caleb's retreating figure, walking toward the barn, with his shoulders tight and his fists clenched. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. She just hoped together would be enough. Caleb didn't come back to the house until after dark. Clara kept dinner warm, kept the children fed, kept the fire burning. She didn't ask questions when he finally walked through the door, his face carved from stone, his eyes empty. He ate in silence. The children, sensing something wrong, were quiet too. Even Sarah didn't chatter. After the children were in bed, Clara found Caleb standing by the window, staring out at nothing. "Tell me," she said. He didn't turn around. "It's not your concern. Everything that happens in this house is my concern. You made it my concern when you brought me here." Caleb's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he pulled the letter from his pocket and handed it to her. Clara read it by firelight. The words were polite. The meaning was not. Elijah Crane was offering to buy the Hartley Ranch. Offering generously, he claimed. More than the land was worth. But the offer had a deadline 2 weeks, and the implication was clear. Accept the offer or face the consequences. "What consequences?" Clara asked. "Crane controls the water rights upstream. He can divert the creek that feeds my land. Without water, I can't run cattle. Without cattle, I can't pay my debts. Without paying my debts..." Caleb's voice trailed off. "He'll take the ranch anyway." "He'll take everything." Caleb finally turned to face her. "This land is all I have, Clara. All my children have. Eleanor is buried here. Her ashes are scattered in the meadow where we used to picnic. If I lose this place, I lose her too." Clara folded the letter carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I've been fighting Crane for years. He's wanted this land since before Eleanor died. She was the one who always figured out how to outmaneuver him. She was smart, smarter than me. She'd know what to do. But she's not here." "No, she's not." Clara handed the letter back to him. "Then we'll figure it out ourselves." Caleb looked at her with something like wonder. I told you I'm not going anywhere. That includes when things get hard." He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're something else, Clara Whitmore." "So I've been told." The next morning, Clara found another of Eleanor's notes. This one was tucked inside a book on the shelf, a volume about Montana law that looked like it had never been opened. The note was longer than the others. "If Crane ever comes for the water rights, check the original deed. Father said there was something about shared access written into the land grant. He tried to hide it, but it's there. Don't let Caleb give up." Clara read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. She found Caleb in the barn, mending a harness that had seen better days. "Where's the original deed to this land?" He looked up surprised. "Lockbox in my room." "Why?" Clara showed him the note. Caleb's face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, grief, hope, disbelief. He took the paper from her hands like it was made of glass. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew he'd try this eventually. She was protecting you. Even after..." Clara couldn't finish the sentence. Caleb was already moving, striding toward the house, with Clara hurrying to keep up. He went straight to his room the first time Clara had seen inside it, and pulled a metal box from under the bed. His hands shook as he unlocked it. Inside were papers, documents, the accumulated proof of a life built from nothing. Birth certificates, marriage license, land deeds. Caleb found the original deed and spread it on the bed, scanning the dense legal language with desperate eyes. There. Clara pointed to a paragraph near the bottom. Shared water access granted in perpetuity to all properties within the original land grant boundary. Caleb read it again. His breath came out in a rush. She was right. The water rights can't be diverted. It's written into the original grant. Crane can't legally cut off my water. Does he know? He might not. This deed is older than anything he'd have on record. He probably thinks he can bully me into selling before I figure it out. Clara felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Then we show him he's wrong. Caleb looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw real hope in his eyes. We show him, he agreed. Together. They rode to town the next day, Clara and Caleb, and the deed that could save everything. The children stayed with Samuel, who promised to guard them with his life. Clara didn't think he was exaggerating. The ride was long and cold, but Clara barely noticed. Her mind was spinning with possibilities, with plans, with the strange exhilaration of fighting for something that mattered. "You didn't have to come," Caleb said as they approached town. "Try and stop me." He almost smiled. "I'm learning not to try." The lawyer's office was small and cluttered, run by a man named Henderson, who looked like he'd been practicing law since before the territory existed. He examined the deed with rheumy eyes that missed nothing. "Well," he said finally, "this is quite clear. The water rights are shared. Mr. Crane has no legal basis to divert the creek." "Will that stop him?" Clara asked. Henderson peered at her over his spectacles. "Legally, yes. But Elijah Crane isn't known for respecting legal niceties. You'll need to file this with the territorial office, make it a matter of public record. Once it's official, even Crane won't be able to ignore it." "How long will that take?" "Week, maybe 2. The office is in Helena. I can send it by courier, but with winter—" Henderson shrugged. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Crane's deadline is in 12 days. Then I suggest you pray for good weather." They left the lawyer's office with copies of everything the original deed safely locked away. Caleb was quiet as they walked to the general store for supplies. "It's not over," Clara said. "No. Crane won't wait quietly. When he realizes I'm not going to sell, he'll do something. Then we'll be ready." Caleb stopped walking. Right there in the middle of the street, with people flowing around them, he turned to face her. "Why are you doing this?" His voice was rough with something she couldn't name. "This isn't your fight. You could walk away. Find somewhere easier, someone who isn't drowning in debt and enemies and 3 children who need me, and a man who's too stubborn to ask for help." Clara shook her head. "I'm exactly where I want to be. Caleb Hartley. Stop trying to talk me out of it." He stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, the walls he kept so carefully in place cracking just a little. "Eleanor would have liked you," he said quietly. "I hope so. She seems like she was remarkable." "She was." Caleb paused. "But so are you." Before Clara could respond, a voice cut through the cold air. Well, Caleb Hartley, and who's this?" Clara turned to find a man approaching them. Tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and eyes like a snake. Everything about him screamed money and menace. Elijah Crane. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and Crane. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything on this land concerns me." Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you visited Henderson, getting your affairs in order before the sale. I hope—" "There isn't going to be a sale." Crane's smile flickered. "I'd reconsider that position if I were you. Montana winters are hard. Accidents happen. Barns burn. Cattle wander off." His eyes slid to Clara. "Women disappear." Clara felt ice run down her spine, but she refused to look away. "Is that a threat, Mr. Crane?" "Just an observation, miss." Crane tipped his hat mockingly. "I do hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. The Hartley Ranch has a way of destroying the women who live there." Caleb moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment he was beside her. The next, he had Crane by the collar, lifting the older man onto his toes. "You say one more word about my wife or this woman and I will end you. Do you understand me?" Crane's face went red, but his smile never wavered. "Temper, temper. This is exactly why you're going to lose everything, Hartley. You react. You don't think. Eleanor was the thinker, and Eleanor is dead." Caleb's fist drew back. "Caleb." Clara's voice cut through the red haze. "He's not worth it. He wants you to hit him. He wants witnesses to see you attack an unarmed man." Caleb froze. His breath came in harsh gasps, but slowly, he released Crane and stepped back. "Smart woman," Crane said, straightening his collar. "Too smart for the likes of you, Hartley. Enjoy her while you can." He walked away, leaving them standing in the street with a dozen curious eyes watching. Caleb's hands were shaking. Clara reached out and took one, steadying him. "Breathe," she said softly. "We're okay. We're going to be okay. He threatened you. He threatens everyone. It's what men like him do." Clara squeezed his hand. "But we have the deed. We have the law on our side. He can't win this." Caleb looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "I can't lose you too," he said. "I know I have no right to say that. I know we barely know each other. But Clara—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I can't lose you too." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You won't," she promised. "I'm not going anywhere." They rode home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Warmer, fuller, like something had been spoken without words. The trouble started 3 days later. Clara woke to screaming. She was out of bed and running before her eyes fully adjusted to the darkness, following the sound to the front of the house. Thomas stood on the porch pointing toward the barn. "Fire! The barn's on fire!" Clara's blood went cold. Caleb was already sprinting across the yard, Samuel beside him. Orange light flickered against the snow, and even from this distance Clara could hear the terrified screams of the horses trapped inside. "Thomas, get your sisters. Keep them in the house. Don't come out no matter what." "But I can help." "Keep your sisters safe. That's how you help." Thomas's face was torn with conflict, but he nodded and ran back inside. Clara grabbed a bucket and ran toward the well, her bare feet burning against the frozen ground. She couldn't think about the cold. Couldn't think about anything except the horses, the fire, the life they could lose. By the time she reached the barn, Caleb and Samuel had gotten the doors open. Smoke billowed out, thick and choking. Clara could barely see. "The horses," she gasped. "Samuel's getting them out. I need to save the equipment, the feed." Caleb's voice was ragged with smoke. "Without them, we're done." Clara didn't hesitate. She plunged into the smoke beside him. The heat was unbearable. Her lungs screamed for air that wasn't there. But she found the bags of grain and started dragging them toward the door one after another, while Caleb fought the flames with bucket after bucket of water. It wasn't enough. The fire was spreading too fast, eating through dry wood like a hungry beast. "Clara, get out!" Caleb grabbed her arm. "It's going to collapse. Not without you. I'm right behind you. Go." She went, stumbling through the smoke lungs, burning eyes streaming. She made it to the door just as a beam crashed down behind her. Clara spun around. Caleb. For one horrible moment, there was nothing but smoke and fire and the groaning of dying timber. Then he emerged coughing and stumbling. His clothes singed his face black with soot. Clara ran to him. She didn't think, didn't plan, just threw her arms around him and held on. "You idiot," she gasped against his chest. "You could have died." "Had to save what I could." His arms came around her, holding her just as tightly. The fire was set. I found the oil can. Clara pulled back to look at him. Crane? Can't prove it. But yes. Caleb's jaw was hard as iron. This is just the beginning. He's going to keep coming until we break. Then we don't break. The barn was a loss. Half of it anyway, the half that held the winter, feed the equipment, the supplies they needed to survive until spring. The horses were safe. Samuel had gotten them out before the fire spread. But the damage was done. Clara watched Caleb survey the destruction at dawn, his face gray with exhaustion and something darker. We can't survive winter without that feed, he said quietly. The cattle will starve. Can we buy more? Not without money I don't have. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Crane knew exactly what to destroy. He knew it would break us. But we have the deed, which is sitting in Henderson's office waiting to be sent to Helena. Crane doesn't care about legal niceties. He said it himself. By the time the paperwork goes through, I'll have lost everything anyway. Clara felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. All the hope they'd built over the past weeks crumbling to ash just like the barn. There has to be another way. If there is, I can't see it. The children appeared at the door. Thomas was holding Sarah Mary pressed against his side. All three of them stared at the smoking ruins with faces too young for this much loss. Papa. Mary's voice was small. Are we going to be okay? Caleb looked at his children. Looked at the destruction. Looked at Clara. I don't know, baby girl, he said honestly. I don't know. Clara made a decision in that moment. A dangerous one, a stupid one, but the only one she could see. I'm going to Helena, she said. Caleb's head snapped toward her. What? The courier will take too long. If I ride hard, I can get there in 3 days. I can file the deed myself, make it official before Crane does any more damage. That's insane. You'll freeze to death on the road. I'll take blankets, extra clothes. I'll stop at the way stations. Clara. What's the alternative? She cut him off. Wait here while Crane picks us apart piece by piece. Watch you lose everything because the paperwork was too slow. She shook her head. I'm going. Caleb grabbed her arm. You could die out there. The mountains, the cold, the distance. I know. Clara met his eyes. I know exactly what I'm risking. But I'd rather die trying to save this family than watch it be destroyed while I do nothing. This family. Caleb's voice was strange. You called it this family. It is my family, whether you want it to be or not. Clara pulled her arm free. I'll leave at first light. She walked away before he could argue further, before she could lose her nerve. That night there was a knock on her door. Clara opened it to find Caleb standing in the hallway, his face half hidden in shadow. I can't stop you, he said. No, you can't. So I'm coming with you. Clara blinked. What about the children? Samuel will watch them. He's protected this family for 20 years. He can handle a few days more. Caleb. You're not riding to Helena alone. His voice brooked no argument. If you're going to do this fool thing, I'm going to be right beside you. Clara stared at him. This man who'd bought her like property, who'd kept her at arm's length for weeks, who'd only just started to let her see the person beneath the grief. Why? She asked. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched her face. Just barely. Just his fingertips against her cheek. Because you matter, he said. You matter to my children. You matter to this ranch. He paused, and his voice dropped. You matter to me. Clara's breath caught. Caleb, we leave at first light. He dropped his hand. Get some sleep. It's going to be a hard ride. He walked away, leaving Clara standing in her doorway, with her heart pounding and her world tilting on its axis. In the morning, they rode toward Helena together. And whatever came next, they would face it the same way, together. The cold was worse than anything Clara had ever experienced. They rode hard through the first day, stopping only to rest the horses and eat the dried meat and biscuits Clara had packed. The mountains rose around them like frozen giants, indifferent to the two small humans struggling through their domain. Caleb rode ahead, breaking trail through the snow, his body hunched against the wind. He hadn't spoken much since they'd left, but his presence was a constant reassurance. She wasn't alone out here. Whatever happened, she wasn't alone. They reached the first way station just before nightfall, a tiny cabin run by an old trapper named Gus, who looked at them like they'd lost their minds. "Helena, in this weather." He shook his head. "You'll be dead before you hit the pass." "We don't have a choice," Caleb said flatly. Gus studied them for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your funeral. There's stew on the fire and hay in the lean-to for your horses. That'll be $2. Clara ate mechanically, too tired to taste the food. Her hands were raw from holding the reins. Her face burned from the wind. Every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion. Caleb sat across from her watching the fire. He looked as tired as she felt, but there was something else in his expression too. Something she couldn't quite read. "You should sleep," he said. "We leave before dawn." "So should you." "I will. Just need to think for a while." Clara hesitated, then stood and crossed to where he sat. She lowered herself beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the crackling fire. "Eleanor." Clara's heart clenched. Of course. Always Eleanor. The ghost that would never leave. "She would have hated this," Caleb continued. "Hated that I'm risking everything on a desperate ride through the mountains. Hated that I'm putting you in danger." He paused. "But she would have understood why. She always understood the things I couldn't explain." "Tell me about her." Caleb turned his head to look at her. "You want to hear about my dead wife? I want to know who she was. Not just the notes she left behind, but the woman who wrote them." Something shifted in Caleb's face. The walls he kept so carefully in place crumbled just a little. "She was sunshine," he said softly. "Even in the worst times, even when we had nothing, she could find something to smile about. She made everything better just by being there." His voice caught. "When she died, it was like someone blew out the sun. I've been stumbling around in the dark ever since." Clara reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold, rough with calluses, but they wrapped around hers like she was the only solid thing in the world. "I'm not Eleanor," she said quietly. "I can never be her, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Caleb looked at their joined hands. When he raised his eyes to hers, something had changed in them. Something warmer. Something alive. "I know," he said. "That's what terrifies me." They didn't speak again that night, but when Clara finally lay down to sleep, wrapped in every blanket they had, she could still feel the warmth of his hand in hers. The second day was harder. The pass was treacherous, the snow deeper than Caleb had expected. Twice Clara's horse stumbled, nearly throwing her. Twice Caleb was there reaching out to steady her, his face tight with fear he wouldn't name. "We should turn back," he said after the second near fall. "No." "Clara, if we turn back, Crane wins. The children lose their home. You lose everything Eleanor built." Clara shook her head fiercely. "I didn't come this far to quit." Caleb stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. "All right. But stay close. If something happens." "Nothing's going to happen." She was wrong. They were halfway through the pass when the shot rang out. Clara heard it before she felt it. The crack of a rifle echoing off the mountains, followed by a searing pain in her shoulder that nearly knocked her from her horse. "Clara!" Caleb caught her before she fell. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her from her saddle onto his horse. Blood soaked through her coat, hot against the cold. Hold on to me." Clara gripped his coat with her good hand. The world was spinning, the pain turning everything white at the edges. Another shot. This one hit the snow beside them, sending up a spray of ice. Caleb kicked his horse into a gallop. Clara pressed against his chest. She could hear his heart pounding, feel the desperation in every movement. "Who?" she gasped. "Crane's men. Has to be." Caleb's voice was hard as iron. "He must have known we'd try for Helena. Must have sent someone ahead." Another shot. This one went wide. They rounded a bend in the trail, and suddenly they were descending the pass opening up before them. Caleb pushed the horse harder, faster, until Clara was sure they'd both go tumbling down the mountainside. But they didn't fall. Somehow, impossibly, they made it. The shots stopped. Either they'd outrun the shooter, or he'd given up. Clara didn't know which and didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the pain in her shoulder and the sound of Caleb's voice in her ear. "Stay with me. Clara, stay with me. We're almost there. Just hold on." She held on. What else could she do? They found shelter in an abandoned miner's cabin at the base of the pass. Caleb carried Clara inside and laid her on the only piece of furniture, a rough wooden table that had seen better days. "Let me see." His voice was surprisingly steady as he peeled back her coat. Clara hissed in pain. The bullet had gone through the flesh of her shoulder, missing the bone, but leaving a ragged wound that bled freely. "I need to stop the bleeding." Caleb was already tearing strips from his shirt. "This is going to hurt." "It already hurts." He almost smiled. Almost. "It's going to hurt worse." He was right. When he pressed the makeshift bandage against her wound, Clara screamed. The pain was blinding, all-consuming, wiping out everything else. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Caleb's voice cracked. "I never should have let you come. I should have made you stay." "Made me?" Clara laughed, though it came out more like a sob. "You couldn't make me do anything, Caleb Hartley. And you know it." He finished binding her wound, his hands gentle despite his obvious fear. When he was done, he pulled her into his arms and held her against his chest. "You scared me," he whispered into her hair. "God, Clara, when I saw you fall, I didn't fall. You caught me. I almost didn't. But you did." Clara pulled back enough to look at him. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, his whole body shaking with suppressed emotion. "You caught me. You saved me. That's what matters." Caleb touched her face. His fingers trembled against her cheek. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Clara's breath caught. "I know I shouldn't," Caleb continued, his voice raw. "I know it's too soon, too fast, too everything. But I've been dying inside for 14 months, and then you showed up and suddenly I could breathe again. I could feel again. I could imagine a future that wasn't just endless gray." "Caleb, you don't have to say it back. I don't expect you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. Before anything else happens, before we reach Helena, before—" His voice broke. "I needed you to know that you're not just someone I bought. You're not just someone who keeps my house. You're the woman who brought me back to life, and I love you for it." Clara reached up with her good hand and touched his face. "I love you too," she said simply. Caleb made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You don't have to." "I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true." Clara smiled through her own tears. "I've been in love with you since you walked through the smoke to save your children. Since you held Mary's hand through her fever. Since you looked at me like I was worth something, not just convenient." He kissed her then. Softly, gently, like she was something precious that might break. Clara kissed him back, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, ignoring everything except the taste of him, and the warmth of his arms, and the knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. "We still have to get to Helena," Clara said. "I know. We still have to file the deed and stop Crane and save the ranch. I know. So we should probably stop kissing and start planning." Caleb laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine, the first one Clara had ever heard from him. Probably, he agreed, but he kissed her again anyway. They reached Helena on the third day. Clara's shoulder throbbed with every step of the horse, but she refused to stop, refused to slow down. They'd come too far to fail now. The territorial office was a squat stone building in the center of town. Caleb helped Clara down from the horse and kept his arm around her as they walked inside. The clerk was a bored-looking man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He barely glanced up when they entered. "Help you?" "We need to file a land deed," Caleb said. "It's urgent." "Everything's urgent." The clerk sighed. "Fill out the forms. Pay the fee, come back in a week." "We don't have a week." Clara stepped forward, ignoring the pain that shot through her shoulder. "This deed contains water rights that are being contested. If we don't file it today, someone is going to steal our land." The clerk looked at her, really looked, and his expression shifted slightly. "You're hurt. Shot, on the way here, by men who don't want this deed to be filed." Clara met his eyes. "Please. We've ridden 3 days through the mountains. We've nearly died twice. All we need is for you to do your job." The clerk was quiet for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "Let me see the deed." Clara handed it over. The clerk examined it carefully, his eyebrows rising as he read. "This is the original grant," he said slowly. "The one from 52. Yes. These water rights, they're shared, in perpetuity." He looked up at them. "Who's trying to contest this, Elijah Crane?" Something flickered in the clerk's eyes. Recognition. Distaste. "I know Crane. He's been trying to consolidate land in that area for years." The clerk reached for his stamp. "I'll file this today. Priority processing. You'll have your official documentation by tomorrow morning." Clara felt her knees go weak. If Caleb hadn't been holding her, she might have fallen. "Thank you," she whispered. The clerk stamped the deed with a firm, decisive motion. "Thank me by keeping your land. Someone needs to stand up to Crane, and it might as well be you." They found a boarding house and rented a room. Clara was too exhausted to care about propriety, too hurt to worry about what anyone might think. Caleb helped her into bed, changed her bandage with gentle hands, made sure she was warm and comfortable before he finally allowed himself to sit down. "We did it," Clara said. "You did it." Caleb shook his head in wonder. "I never would have found that note without you. Never would have thought to ride to Helena. Never would have had the courage to fight back. You would have figured it out eventually." "No, I wouldn't have." He reached out and took her hand. "I was ready to give up Clara. Ready to sell, to take my children, and start over somewhere else. I told myself it was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But the truth is, I was just tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of losing. And now?" Caleb brought her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. "Now, I have something worth fighting for." They returned to the ranch 4 days later, the official documentation safely in Clara's coat pocket. Samuel met them at the gate, his weathered face creased with relief. "Thank God. When you didn't come back on the third day, I feared the worst." "We had some trouble on the road," Caleb said grimly. "How are the children?" "Safe. Worried sick about you both, but safe." Samuel's eyes went to Clara's bandaged shoulder. "What happened?" "Crane's men. They were waiting in the pass." Samuel's expression darkened. "That snake. He's been by twice while you were gone. Asking questions. Making threats." "What kind of threats?" "The usual. Said you'd regret not taking his offer. Said you'd lose everything." Samuel paused. "Said the woman you brought here would pay for sticking her nose where it didn't belong." Clara felt cold, despite the warmth of her coat. But before she could respond, 3 small figures came running out of the house. "Papa, Miss Clara." The children hit them like a wave. Thomas grabbed Caleb's coat. Mary threw her arms around Clara's waist. Sarah just stood there, tears streaming down her face, too overwhelmed to move. "You came back," Mary sobbed. "You came back, you came back." "Of course we came back." Clara knelt down, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "I promised you I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Remember?" Mary nodded, hiccuping. "I remember." "Well, I'm not saying goodbye. I'm staying right here, forever." Thomas looked at his father. "Is it true? Did you save the ranch?" Caleb pulled the documentation from Clara's coat and held it up. "It's true. Crane can't touch us. The water rights are ours and there's nothing he can do about it." Thomas's face split into the first genuine smile Clara had ever seen from him. "I knew it," he said fiercely. "I knew you'd figure it out." Clara figured it out. Caleb's hand came to rest on her shoulder, her good shoulder. "She found your mother's note. She insisted we ride to Helena. She took a bullet to make sure we got there in time." He looked at his children. "If we still have a home, it's because of her." All three children turned to look at Clara, and for the first time she saw something in their eyes that hadn't been there before. Not just acceptance, not just gratitude, love. "You got shot." Sarah's eyes were huge. "Does it hurt?" "A little," Clara admitted. "But it's getting better." "I'll make you soup," Mary declared. "Mama always made soup when Papa was hurt. I know how." "I'll help," Thomas added. "I can cut the vegetables." They ran inside, already arguing about who would do what, their fear forgotten in the excitement of having their family home. Caleb watched them go, then turned to Clara with eyes that shone with something she was only beginning to understand. "They love you," he said quietly. "I love them too. And me." His voice was hesitant, uncertain, so different from the hard, closed-off man she'd met that first night. "Do you still love me? Even after everything?" Clara reached up and touched his face. "Especially after everything." He kissed her, then right there in front of Samuel and God, and anyone else who might be watching. Kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, the solution to every problem he'd ever faced. And Clara kissed him back, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Caleb found Clara sitting by the fire. She was holding one of Eleanor's notes, the one about the water rights, the one that had saved everything. "You miss her," Clara said without looking up. Caleb sat down beside her. "Every day. I think about her too, about how different things would be if she were still here, about whether she'd hate me for taking her place." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I found this in her things," he said, "after she died. I think she knew she was running out of time, knew she needed to leave something behind." He opened the box and handed Clara a folded piece of paper. One more note hidden away for over a year. Clara unfolded it with trembling hands. "To whoever comes after me. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and someone new is taking care of my family. I hope you're kind. I hope you're patient. I hope you can love them the way they deserve to be loved. Don't try to be me, just be yourself. That will be enough. And please, please take care of Caleb. He pretends to be strong, but he needs someone to lean on. He needs someone to remind him that it's okay to be happy again. He needs someone to show him that love doesn't end just because I did. Be good to him. Be good to my children. And know that wherever I am, I'm grateful for you. With love. Eleanor." Clara read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked up, Caleb was crying too. "She knew," Clara whispered. "She knew you'd need someone." "She always knew." Caleb took the note from her hands and set it aside. Then he took her hands in his. "Eleanor wanted me to be happy again. She wanted the children to have a mother. She wanted someone to keep this family together when she couldn't. And now?" Caleb lifted one hand and touched her face. "Now I want you to marry me." Clara's heart stopped. I know it's sudden. I know we haven't known each other long. But I almost lost you on that mountain, and I realized I don't want to waste another day pretending this is something it's not. His voice shook with emotion. I love you, Clara Whitmore. I want you to be my wife. Not because you were sent here, not because it's convenient, because I choose you, because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Clara looked at this man, this broken, beautiful man who had bought her like property and taught her what it meant to be loved. Yes, she said. Caleb blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes, I choose you too. He pulled her into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. And Clara held him back, knowing that whatever came next, Crane's revenge, the children's questions, the long winter still ahead, they would face it together. As a family. As it was always meant to be. The news spread through the territory like wildfire. Caleb Hartley was getting married. The widower who'd been a ghost for 14 months was taking a wife. And not just any wife, the woman he'd bought for $52. Clara heard the whispers when they went to town for supplies. Saw the looks, the raised eyebrows, the pointed comments that weren't quite quiet enough to be private. Ain't that something? Man buys himself a bride and actually falls in love with her. Poor Eleanor barely cold in her grave, and he's already replacing her. That girl must be something special, or desperate. Maybe both. Clara kept her head high and her mouth shut. Let them talk. Let them wonder. She knew what was real, and that was all that mattered. But Thomas heard them too. They're wrong, he said fiercely as they loaded supplies into the wagon. You're not replacing Mama. You're just... I'm just Clara, she finished gently. That's all I've ever been. Thomas nodded, his jaw set with determination. Well, I'm going to tell anyone who says different that they're a liar. Clara's heart swelled. This boy who'd hated her on sight, who'd told her she didn't belong, was now ready to fight for her honor. Thank you, Thomas. But some battles aren't worth fighting. This one is. Caleb appeared at the wagon, his arms full of feed sacks. What's this about fighting? Nothing. Thomas climbed into the wagon bed. Just making sure people know the truth. Caleb looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She shook her head slightly. Later. They were almost out of town when the trouble found them. Elijah Crane stepped into the road, forcing Caleb to pull up the horses. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, both carrying rifles. Hartley. Crane's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were poison. I hear congratulations are in order. Step aside, Crane. Now. Is that any way to talk to a neighbor? I just want to offer my best wishes. Crane's gaze slid to Clara. And my condolences to your bride. She's going to need them. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. Is that a threat? Just an observation. This territory has a way of eating people alive, especially women who don't know their place. Crane smiled, all teeth and malice. Your first wife learned that lesson. Let's hope your second one is a faster learner. Clara felt Caleb coil beside her like a spring about to snap. She put her hand on his arm. Mr. Crane, she said calmly, I've been shot at, frozen half to death, and threatened by better men than you. If you have something to say, say it. Otherwise, get out of our way. Crane's smile faltered. Just for a moment, but Clara saw it. Brave words, Mrs. Hartley. Miss Whitmore. For a few more days anyway. Enjoy those days. They might be your last. He stepped aside, his men following. Caleb urged the horses forward without another word. They were half a mile out of town before he spoke. You shouldn't have antagonized him. I didn't antagonize him. I told him the truth. Same thing with a man like Crane. Caleb's jaw was tight. He doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. And he definitely doesn't let people make him look foolish in public. Then he shouldn't stand in the middle of the road making threats. Caleb looked at her, really looked, and despite everything, he laughed. God, you're something. So you keep telling me. He reached over and took her hand. I'm serious, Clara. Crane is dangerous. He's not going to stop just because we filed that deed. I know. He could come after you, after the children, after everything we've built. I know that too. Clara squeezed his hand. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being afraid of Elijah Crane. I've been afraid my whole life of my aunt, of being alone, of not being wanted. I'm done being afraid. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand and kissed it. I love you. I love you too. Now let's go home. The wedding was set for the following Sunday. It would be small, just the family Samuel and a few neighbors who'd been kind to the Hartleys through the long months of mourning. The minister from Helena had agreed to make the trip weather permitting. Clara spent the days leading up to it in a strange state of suspended animation. She went through the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, caring for the children, but her mind was elsewhere, on the future that was coming, on the vows she would make, on the life she was about to begin. The children threw themselves into the preparations with an enthusiasm that made her heart ache. Mary insisted on making flower arrangements, though there weren't any flowers to be found in Montana winter. She improvised with pine branches and red berries, creating something surprisingly beautiful. Sarah decided she would be the flower girl even without flowers. She practiced walking slowly up and down the main room, scattering imaginary petals until Clara had to hide her smile behind her hand. And Thomas took on the role of protector with a seriousness that made him seem far older than his 8 years. I'm going to make sure nothing goes wrong, he announced. I'm going to watch for trouble. What kind of trouble? Any kind. Crane's men. Bad weather. Anything that might ruin your day. He paused. Mama's day got ruined by rain. She said it didn't matter, but I could tell she was sad. Clara knelt down to look him in the eye. Thomas, I don't care if it rains or snows or the roof falls in. I'm marrying your father because I love him and because I love you and your sisters. Nothing could ruin that. Thomas studied her face with those two old eyes. You really mean it, don't you? Every word. He nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm still going to watch. The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room, Eleanor's sewing room, though it had become hers now, and listened to the wind outside. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would become Clara Hartley. Tomorrow, this family would officially become hers. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Come in. The door opened to reveal Caleb holding something in his hands. I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, he said quietly, but I wanted to give you something. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. In the dim light, Clara could see that he was holding a small wooden box. This was Eleanor's, he said. She wore it on our wedding day. I've been saving it, not knowing what to do with it. But tonight I realized she would have wanted you to have it. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a delicate gold locket. Caleb, I can't. Yes, you can. He lifted the locket from its bed and unclasped it. May I? Clara nodded, unable to speak. Caleb reached around her neck and fastened the locket, his fingers warm against her skin. Eleanor had a picture of me inside, he said. I replaced it. Clara opened the locket with trembling hands. Inside was a tiny photograph, not of Caleb, but of the 3 children. They're your family now, Caleb said softly. I wanted you to have them close to your heart. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll marry me tomorrow. I already said yes. Say it again. I like hearing it. Clara laughed through her tears. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Caleb kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then softly, gently her lips. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow. The wedding morning dawned clear and cold. Clara woke to find Mary and Sarah already in her room, bouncing with excitement. It's today. It's today. Clara let them help her dress, let them fuss with her hair, let them exclaim over the locket Caleb had given her. Their joy was infectious, filling the small room until there was no space left for doubt or fear. "You look beautiful," Mary said solemnly. "Like a princess." "Like a queen," Sarah corrected. "Princesses are silly. Queens are smart." "I think Miss Clara is both," Thomas said from the doorway. He was wearing his Sunday best, his hair slicked back with water. "Papa sent me to tell you the minister is here." Clara's heart stuttered. "Already?" "It's time." Thomas offered her his arm with a formality that was almost comical on an 8-year-old. "May I escort you, Miss Clara?" Clara took his arm, blinking back tears. "It would be my honor." The ceremony was everything Clara had never dared to dream. She walked through the main room on Thomas's arm, Mary and Sarah preceding her with their imaginary flowers. Samuel stood by the door, his weathered face soft with emotion. And at the end of the room, standing before the minister, was Caleb. He was wearing his best suit, the one he'd worn to Eleanor's funeral. But today, his face was different, not the mask of grief Clara had first seen, but something open and alive and full of hope. "You look—" He shook his head, words failing him. "So do you." The minister cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were simple. The promises were eternal. And when the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Caleb cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her like she was the only person in the world. The children cheered. Samuel wiped his eyes. And Clara, who had spent 19 years believing she would never be wanted, realized that she had finally come home. The celebration after was modest but joyful. There was cake Clara had baked it herself, and there was music from Samuel's old fiddle, and there was dancing. Caleb spun Clara around the main room while the children clapped and laughed. He wasn't a good dancer, but neither was she, and somehow that made it perfect. "Mrs. Hartley," he murmured in her ear. "Mr. Hartley. I like the sound of that." "So do I." They might have danced all night if the knock hadn't come. The sound cut through the celebration like a knife. Everyone froze. The music stopped. Caleb released Clara and moved toward the door, his body tense. "Stay here." He opened the door. A woman stood on the porch. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with a face like sour milk and eyes that held nothing but contempt. Clara's blood ran cold. "Aunt Ruth." Ruth pushed past Caleb without waiting for an invitation, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on Clara. "So it's true," she said. "You actually married him." Clara's voice came out steady, though her heart was pounding. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about your little adventure. Filing deeds, fighting off Elijah Crane." Ruth's lip curled. "You've gotten above yourself, Clara. Forgot where you came from." "I know exactly where I came from. I came from nothing. From a house where I wasn't wanted, from a woman who sold me to the first bidder." Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Ruth and the children. "What I don't understand is why you're here now." Ruth's eyes flickered. Something that might have been guilt quickly smothered. "Crane came to see me, offered me money to tell him everything I know about you. Your weaknesses, your fears, the things that would make you break." Clara's stomach dropped. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him you were weak, soft, that you'd crumble at the first sign of real trouble." Ruth paused. "I was wrong." The admission hung in the air. Clara didn't know what to say. "He's coming," Ruth continued. "Tonight. He's got men, guns, and legal papers he claims prove the water rights are his. He's going to take this ranch whether you want to give it up or not." "How do you know this?" "Because I was supposed to be his inside woman. Get into your good graces. Find out what you're planning. Report back." Ruth's voice was flat. "But when I got here and saw what you've built, what you've become, I couldn't do it." Caleb stepped forward. "Why should we believe you?" Ruth turned to face him. "You shouldn't." I've never given anyone a reason to trust me, least of all Clara. But I'm telling you the truth anyway, because maybe it's not too late for me to do something right." She looked at Clara, and for the first time Clara saw something human in those hard eyes. "I'm sorry," Ruth said quietly. "For everything. I know it doesn't change anything. I know sorry doesn't fix the years I stole from you, but I'm sorry anyway." Clara stared at her aunt. This woman, who had made her childhood a misery, who had sold her like property, who had spent decades treating her like a burden. "You're right," Clara said finally. "Sorry doesn't fix anything, but thank you for the warning." Ruth nodded once. "I'll go. You don't want me here for what's coming." "Wait." The word surprised Clara as much as it surprised Ruth. "If Crane finds out you warned us, then I'll deal with the consequences." Ruth almost smiled. "It's the least I can do." She walked out into the darkness, and Clara watched her go with a feeling she couldn't name. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something close to understanding. "Clara." Caleb's voice was urgent. "If Crane is coming, then we fight." Clara turned to face her family. "Samuel, get the rifles. Thomas, take your sisters to the cellar." "No." Thomas's jaw was set. "I'm staying." "Thomas." "I'm staying. This is my home too. I'm not going to hide while everyone else fights for it." Clara looked at Caleb. He nodded slowly. "All right. But you stay behind us, understand? You don't do anything without permission." Thomas nodded fiercely. The next hour was preparation. Rifles loaded. Positions assigned. The younger children hidden safely in the cellar with strict instructions not to come out until someone came for them. Clara stood by the window watching the darkness the rifle Caleb had given her cold and heavy in her hands. She'd never shot anyone before. She hoped she wouldn't have to tonight. "They're coming." Samuel's voice cut through the tension. Clara peered into the darkness and saw them torches a dozen or more moving toward the ranch like a slow-burning fire. Caleb moved to stand beside her. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I want you to know that these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Happier than I thought I'd ever be again." "Don't talk like that. We're going to be fine." "I know, but just in case." Clara turned and kissed him. Hard, fierce, a promise and a prayer all wrapped into one. "We're going to be fine," she repeated. "Now let's go save our home." Crane rode at the head of his men, torch in one hand, papers in the other. He stopped just outside rifle range and called out into the darkness. "Hartley, I've got legal documents here that say this land is mine. Come out peacefully and no one gets hurt." Caleb stepped onto the porch rifle across his chest. "Those documents are worthless. The territorial office already confirmed our water rights." "Did they?" Crane's voice was pleasant, conversational. "Funny thing about paper. It burns, and so do territorial offices when properly motivated." Clara felt ice run down her spine. "He burned the records." "Maybe, maybe not." Caleb's voice was steady. "But we still have our copies. Legal verified official. Copies can be disputed, especially when the people who verified them aren't around to testify anymore." Crane nudged his horse forward. "Last chance, Hartley. Walk away and I'll let you live. Stay and—" A shot rang out. Not from Crane's men. From behind Clara. She spun around. Thomas stood there, his face white, a smoking rifle in his hands. And 20 feet from the house, one of Crane's men was on the ground clutching his arm. "He was sneaking around back," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "He had a torch. He was going to burn us out." Chaos erupted. Crane's men charged. Rifle fire cracked through the night. Clara aimed and fired, not thinking, just acting, protecting her home, her family, her life. The fight seemed to last forever. It probably lasted minutes. When it was over, 3 of Crane's men were wounded and the rest were running. Crane himself was on the ground, Samuel's boot on his chest. "You're done," Caleb said, standing over his enemy. "This land isn't yours. It never will be. And if you ever threaten my family again, I won't stop with wounding your men." Crane's face twisted with fury. "This isn't over, Hartley. You'll what the territorial marshal is already on his way. We sent word 2 days ago when we heard you were planning something." Caleb smiled grimly. "My wife has a way of anticipating trouble." Clara stepped forward, looking down at the man who'd tried to destroy everything she loved. "Go home, Mr. Crane. And don't come back." 2 days later, Elijah Crane was arrested for arson, attempted murder, and fraud. His forged documents were exposed, his hired guns scattered, his empire crumbling. Clara stood on the porch with Caleb, watching the marshal lead Crane away in chains. "It's over," Caleb said. "Is it the legal part anyway? Crane's finished. He'll be in prison for years." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. "What about us?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he turned her to face him. "Us," he said, "is just beginning." Spring came early that year. Clara noticed it first in small ways, the ice on the creek starting to thin, the wind carrying hints of warmth, the days growing longer and brighter. And then one morning, Mary burst into the kitchen with news that made Clara's heart soar. "The flowers are coming in Mama's meadow. The flowers are coming." They walked to the meadow together, all 5 of them, a family now bound by choice as much as circumstance. The wildflowers were just beginning to push through the snow, tiny points of color in an endless white. "This is where we scattered Mama's ashes," Thomas said quietly. "She's part of this meadow now." Clara knelt down and touched one of the fragile blooms. "She's part of all of you," she said. "And that means she's part of me now too." Caleb crouched beside her. "Eleanor would have loved you." "I know." Clara smiled through her tears. "She told me." "She what?" "Her last note, the one you gave me." Clara touched the locket at her throat. "She asked me to take care of you, to love you, to help you be happy again." Caleb's eyes filled with tears. "And have you?" "I've tried." Clara looked around at the children, at the meadow, at the mountains rising in the distance. "I think I'm still trying." "Then you've done everything she asked, everything I could have asked." He pulled her to her feet and wrapped his arms around her. "I love you, Clara Hartley." "I love you too." The children piled on, turning the embrace into a tangle of arms and laughter and joy. "I love you, Mama Clara," Sarah shouted. "I love you too, sweetheart." "We all do," Mary added solemnly. "Even me," Thomas admitted. "Even though you're terrible at poker." Clara laughed. "I let you win." "Sure you did." They walked home together as a family, leaving the meadow and its memories behind. But Clara knew they'd be back, every spring, every year, for as long as they lived, because this was home now. This frozen, beautiful, impossible place. These people who'd started as strangers and become everything. 6 months later, Clara gave them news that changed everything again. She was pregnant. The announcement came over dinner, slipped in between the pot roast and the apple pie. "By the way," Clara said casually, "you're going to have a new brother or sister come autumn." Silence. Then chaos. Sarah screamed with delight. Mary burst into tears. Thomas tried to look dignified, but couldn't stop grinning. And Caleb just stared at her with eyes that held every emotion at once. "A baby," he whispered. "A baby." He pushed back from the table, pulled her to her feet, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he said against her hair. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for choosing me." "I didn't choose you." Caleb pulled back to look at her face. "I found you, like you were always supposed to be here, like you were always supposed to be mine." Clara smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The aunt who'd sold her, the frozen ride through the mountains, the children who'd learned to love her, the man who'd given her everything she'd never dared to want. She hadn't been bought, she'd been found, and she'd been home ever since. The baby came in October, a healthy girl with Clara's eyes and Caleb's stubborn chin. They named her Hope. Hope Hartley. A new beginning for a family that had learned to survive the impossible. Clara held her daughter in the rocking chair by the fire. The older children gathered around Caleb, standing watch like he'd stood watch over all of them. "She's perfect," Mary whispered. "She's loud," Thomas observed. "She's ours," Sarah declared. Caleb met Clara's eyes over their children's heads. No words were needed. Everything that mattered was right here in this room, in this moment. Clara Whitmore had spent 19 years believing she was worthless. 19 years being told she was a burden. 19 years waiting for someone to see her, to want her, to choose her. And then a broken rancher had paid $52 for a stranger, and everything had changed. She hadn't been bought. She'd been saved. And so had he. The fire crackled. The baby slept. The children argued about who would get to hold her next. And Clara Hartley sat in her home, surrounded by her family, and knew finally, completely, forever, that she was exactly where she was meant to be.